Hi, Evan Pantazi. Today we're going to continue the torquing series. This time we're using the single blade of grass. Now a lot of people believe that the single blade of grass hand, which you see in forms like unsu and other forms, are meant for stabbing or linear type of an action, but they're not. They're really used for a torquing type of an action, as you've seen the last two videos on. And I'm going to I'm going to link the videos right at the end of this one. You'll see the in-screen image pop up, and you just click on that and it'll take you to another one of the hands and another one of the torques that are involved. And this will escalate your Kyusho skill to a very high degree, because it's not linear power that makes the Kyusho work. The Kyusho is going to work because you're striking a nerve in a way to pinch it against a hard surface like a bone, or you are trying to stretch it to cause the aggravation to the nerve so it fires a message rapidly to the central nervous system and brain to cause a physiological dysfunction. Now, the torquing that we handled before was the iron bone hand. We also worked with the blood pool hand. Today we're working with the single blade of grass hand, and it's not really understood unless you look at the katas that they're in. Some of the katas they're in. Some of the katas were made later and they didn't have the dimmak or the Kyusho involved in it, or the understanding in it. So let's go into unsu, because unsu moves the hands in this kind of an action. And that's the exact torquing that you're going to work with this hand position. And again, this is not for a linear power here, it's for a torquing power. What happens is you have to separate the two structures, muscles, bones, whatever structures are protecting that underlying nerve. Now, how you do that with the single blade of grass hand is it would be like grabbing onto a structure, separating it, and then coming in with the finger to attack that one nerve, that one blood vessel, whatever the structure is you're trying to attack and accomplish and cause damage and or cessation of messaging or flow of blood or whatever fluid that those hydraulics are sending through. So this hand torques in this manner. Again, just like unsu, we have the hands doing this. It's that action exactly, that's your torque. You can use the last three fingers like a gripping action to pull, to separate the tissues, okay, to allow that finger to stretch. And again, that finger doesn't poke in a linear manner. It's going to tear. It's going to tear that tissue or stretch that tissue to the maximum so it fails or sends an acute message into the central nervous system. So it causes that dysfunction we were talking about. Now, you also see this in Gokyu. Okay, this is a very prolific technique in Aikido, okay, and some of the grappling arts where they press this way. Now that's an excellent use of torque, because instead of just grabbing the hand and trying to push it down, what they do is they grab it, they leverage it, and they use that set of knuckles right in there to put the pressure onto a specific muscle, tendon, and or nerve, okay, and that muscle, that bone goes in there in a torquing type of an action to separate the tissues a little bit more and pinch the nerve against the bone. And that's why Gokyu is so painful when you do that. Well, this can be done on the neck, the body, the legs, many different areas, as long as you understand a couple different concepts. First of all, Kyusho is not attacking pressure points, because those are fictitious, man-made ideas. It's not dissectable out of a human body. And when you do that, what you think is that the point's right here, you just strike the point, or you strike the point, and it's going to have the effect. And that's where most people have their difficulty learning deep Kyusho or high skill in Kyusho. The Kyusho is the nerve tissues. It's a real entity. You can dissect it out of the human body. It affects your body. It's what makes you move. It's what makes your organs go. It's what makes you digest and breathe, is that neurological action. It makes your heart pump blood. So it's the nerves that you want to attack. That's the vital core. That's the vital target. Okay? When you're doing these attacks, okay, and you're using this single-bladed grass hand, you're tearing the other structures away from it and then attacking in that same rotation to, again, stretch and tear. Now, this is what makes the Kyusho work, as I just mentioned. Okay, it's not hitting a fictitious structure, it's hitting a real anatomical entity called a nerve or a blood vessel. In our case, for the most part, we use nerves because the blood is a little more dangerous to practice and it causes permanent damage. In today's litigious society, we don't want to cause permanent damage. That's why we prefer to do the nerves. The nerves also work instantaneously, where the blood can take a few seconds for it to enact. It'll enact a fainting process through what's called the vasovagal syncope, or fainting, okay, from the lower blood pressure. Okay, and there's many different reasons or ways to affect the blood pressure. But again, it's these torquing actions in the hands that enable that. All right, so again, the single blade of grass is not meant as a linear strike. Okay, it's meant as a rotational strike, a grab and twist and tear. That's one of the aspects of the single-bladed grass hand. And something I haven't mentioned, I've mentioned these torques before in my 6G hand video that I'll link below too, so you can see that. That all these torques were not only described, but they were demonstrated as well. But when you're doing this movement, everybody always thinks of the last three hands grabbing, because that's what people grab with when they do Gokyu or maybe Kodagaeshi. Whatever technique you're using, you're using these last three fingers primarily as your strength finger, because this will allow the hand to flex. Okay, now here's something too. I mentioned the fist before, that correct fist that Gichin Funakoshi put in one of his books. When you're doing this single blade of grass hand, there's a couple different concepts you want to understand. You want to be able to torque. That means being able to move the wrist in a circular pattern, or having the freedom of the wrist to move. If you make a tight fist, that locks up the tendons and the muscles, and you have very little flexibility and rotation and torque in your fist action. Okay, it's the same thing with this hand. If you hold these fingers tight, okay, you're not going to get out, if you hold your tiger claw tight, you can see that there's very little flex in that hand, because the tiger is using all the tendons, the ligaments, and the bones and the muscles of the hand to lock in with that strength. When you use the last three fingers only, you have a lot more flexibility in your hand. So for a second, just make that tiger claw, really compress it in and hold that tight, then try to move your wrist around. It doesn't work. Then hold the last three fingers and see the flexibility, and hold it tight, just like you did with the tiger claw, and see the flexibility that you have. That's what's going to give you that torque, is that ability to flex that wrist structure. Now, when you're doing that, most people will think of those last three fingers grabbing, but they forget one other important tool on this hand. Okay, you've got to look at everything. It's not just the fingers here, or the index finger, the single finger that's causing the tear or the damage. It's also the thumb. Okay, that can be a viable action against nerves in the wrist, the hand, the neck, and many different areas. Now, if you grab in and you grab with the tiger claw, and you can't really stretch the nerve too much, it's when you allow that index finger to go that hand has an awful lot of twist. That awful lot of twist turns into an awful lot of torque, which turns into damage. That's what the hand is all about. It's torque. It's not linear strength. So, one, don't use pressure points. They're not real. Two, understand how deep the underlying structure you're trying to attack is, be it a nerve or vein. Okay. Three, use the proper tool for the proper target and trajectory. And then four, okay, make sure that you've got the torque down, or the twist, or the ability to move with that action to enact it, to bring your Kyusho to a higher skill.